You're watching a BR Proud presentation, a candid conversation on toxic towns, legacy of environmental racism.
Have you ever thought about what you see when you look out your back door? People living in St. James Parish believe what they see is harming them. They live in an area that was once known as plantation country. Now they say it's the petrochemical corridor keeping them just as disenfranchised as their slave ancestors, and they're determined not to give up their fight.
Nestled along the banks of the mighty Mississippi River, just about 40 miles south of Baton Rouge, is St. James Parish.
We had everything in St. James. We were living the life of Raleigh. We had everything. We had pecan trees. We had fruit trees. We plant gardens.
Sharon Levine is a lifelong resident.
We can't do that anymore. Our pecan trees, they barely bear. Our fruit trees die. Whenever we plant the fruit trees, they die.
Levine spent more than 30 years in the classroom as a teacher in St. James. Now, her mission is to help educate the world about what she believes is the very thing killing the only home she's ever known.
The emissions from all these chemical plants are killing our trees. You know, if they're killing the trees, they're killing us too. So this is home. It's no place like home. And this is where we want to stay.
Levine is the founder and president of Rise St. James, an organization formed in 2018 after Formosa Plastics Group announced they had selected St. James Parish to build their $9.4 billion manufacturing complex.
They need to stop permitting all these chemical plants to come into Louisiana, especially in St. James in the 5th District. Put it in their community if it's so good and they want to be polluted, put it in their community. Don't put it in St. James. We are tired and we're not taking anymore.
Formosa is permitted to emit more than 800 tons of hazardous air pollutants each year, which the Centers for Biological Diversity says doubles the emissions in St. James and more than triples the levels of cancer-causing chemicals in the region.
It's in our poor black community. That's racism. That's genocide. That's environmental racism. And I'll stand on it.
When you say racism, to me, it implies that someone has singled out a race of people to attack or to disadvantage, and that's not what's happening.
Greg Bowser is the head of the Louisiana Chemical Association.
There may be a cancer alley, it's just not here.
He disputes any link between the region's industry emissions and harmful health conditions like cancer.
Well, the thing of it is that you don't have that data out there. We talk about the data and we reference the data from the Tumor Registry and from other places that you can see that. But people who say, well, this is Cancer Alley, they don't quote any data to you. It's just what they say it is. For example, the White House said that.
Environmental justice will be at the center of all we do, addressing the disproportionate health and environmental and economic impacts on communities of color, so-called fence line communities, especially those communities, brown, black, Native American, poor whites. It's hard, the hard-hit areas like Cancer Alley in Louisiana.
We reached out to them and said, listen, we don't think there's any data to prove that. If there is, send it to us. I haven't gotten it. And so when somebody mentions that, ask them for the data. I think that's the best thing to do.
The burden of proof should not be on a community to demonstrate that they're not going to get sick and die from a plant that releases things that are known to cause cancer and other health problems.
Dr. Kimberly Terrell works at the Tulane University Environmental Law Clinic. Last fall, she authored Air Pollution and COVID-19, a double whammy for African American and impoverished communities in Cancer Alley.
What we found was pretty consistent with what we've been hearing from the communities that we work with, and that's that African American and low-income communities in Louisiana are overburdened not just with poverty, but also with pollution and with COVID-19.
While the Louisiana Chemical Association sources data from the Tumor Registry, which does not measure the health effects related to air pollution, the Environmental Protection Agency does. In their most recent National Air Toxics Assessment, Louisiana led in the total risk of cancer per million from pollutants, the most concentrated area between New Orleans and Baton Rouge.
The Environmental Protection Agency monitors air pollution across the country. And if you look at their data, it's pretty clear that Cancer Alley exists, and it's a place where people are put at higher cancer risk from toxic air pollution. And that's really irrefutable.
The chemicals that I'm breathing cause me to have autoimmune hepatitis. The chemicals that I'm breathing in the water that I was drinking for years I have aluminum in my body. People around here have cancer. The worst thing that they have around here is cancer. Some of them have asthma, different illnesses. But these chemical plants over decades have been causing illnesses in our communities. So it will stop. Formosa is to stop. They will not be built here.
The groups who say refineries ought to go away or chemical plants ought to go away, they never showed up to talk about how do I replace that? How do you make your mortgage payment until that green job shows up? And that plan hadn't come out yet.
And the United Nations has also weighed in on this, issuing a statement that reads in part, quote, "This form of environmental racism poses serious and disproportionate threats, including the right to equality and non-discrimination, the right to life, the right to health, an adequate standard of living and cultural rights," end quote. Now, we did reach out to Governor John Bel Edwards and Senators Bill Cassidy and John Kennedy with interview requests. None of those requests were returned, though I did have the chance to speak with the former congressman who represented parts of this district in Washington. Cedric Richmond currently serves as President Joe Biden's senior advisor and the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. Here's what he had to say about Cancer Alley and environmental justice.
The name, let's start there. I think the people who live in those communities, those fence-line communities that border our chemical plants and our refineries, I think that they do adopt the name. And I think they have a real concern about environmental justice and cancer rates. And I think that President Biden, I know that President Biden is concerned about it. Environmental justice was a big part of his plan when he ran for president. And he's doing everything he said he would do. No, we're not running from the fact that there are real concerns about environmental justice around in between New Orleans and Baton Rouge.